Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today, Boosting Communication Reliability to Protect and Serve Communities. Here, we're going to discuss how public safety agencies can deliver mission-critical connectivity in the toughest conditions. Thank you all for joining us. I'm Scott Goldie, Product Marketing Manager here at Dejero, and I'll be facilitating today's webinar. I'd like to introduce our panel of experts that will be guiding you through today's presentation. First up is Rory McCabe. He's the Channel Sales Manager at Dejero. Prior to joining the Dejero team, Rory worked at FirstNet and brings several years of experience providing expertise on mobility to the public sector. Our second speaker is Dean Taylor. He's also with Dejero as a Technical Account Manager, and Dean's a former patrol sergeant in San Diego County. He's an FAA Part 107 certified UAS pilot, and during our road trip, took all kinds of good footage that we'll be sharing in the future in some of our content, as he's also an excellent videographer. Also, Michael Weaver joins us. He's a Senior Director of Public Safety and Emergency Preparedness at IP Access. And Michael has over 20 years of experience in the communications industry. He specializes in providing practical solutions for wireless communications, including space-based and terrestrial wireless networks, LTE, and mesh networks. And lastly, but certainly as important as the rest, Dean Drew Delaney. He's our President of U.S. Operations at Haifa. He brings many years of expertise in critical communications for public safety to our panel today. At Haifa, he works with industry partners and public safety customers to solve communications challenges for first responders. Just a couple of notes on housekeeping that I want to go through before we get into the content. We are going to, the webinar will last up to 60 minutes, and we'll have plenty of time for questions. The recording and the presentation deck will be available on dejero.com soon after the session. And if you have any questions, please use the Q&A function in Zoom, and we'll be sure to answer all of your questions at the end of the presentation. So for the agenda for today, the first thing we're going to go through is Michael's going to talk about public safety communications requirements and the challenges that we overcame on our road trip in Colorado and how we did it. Next, we'll cover the testing and the results. Dean's going to go over our testing methods, the results that we were able to achieve in some of the well-known digital dead zones in the regions of Colorado that we visited. And then we'll go through the solution where Dean and Drew will dive into the technology behind the solution a little further. And then we'll jump into the Q&A. So any of your connectivity challenges that you have, any questions that you have on the session and the topics we've discussed, we'll dive into those. And then lastly, we'll cover what's next and how we can help. So Michael's going to summarize kind of next steps and how we can help with your specific connectivity challenges. So next, I'm going to hand it over to Rory. He's going to provide some background on our road trip to Colorado and the communication challenges in the region.
Hi, well, thanks everyone for joining us today. That's me in the middle of some of the most beautiful country and connectivity challenged areas in the United States. Colorado's digital dead zones and the solutions being presented today are near and dear to me for a few reasons. As Scott mentioned earlier, I spent more than 3 years as a government seller for AT&T and FirstNet Services. During that time, we worked tirelessly with local agencies to get cellular infrastructure projects fast-tracked, and they advocated on behalf of our agency partners for additional gap coverage solutions. I'm here today because my intimate experience with the challenges faced and the need to educate public agencies on technological solutions available to them. I hope you enjoy what you're going to learn from Dejero, Haifa Mesh, and our unifying partner IP Access. Living in Colorado and experiencing on a consistent basis the connectivity challenges that we consistently see feature and impact of public safety is really important to me, not only just obviously from a business standpoint, but from a prior career in the health and well-being of my friends and family. I'd like to turn it over to Mike Weaver to walk through the challenges that many of us are facing today, not just in Colorado, but nationally.
Thank you, Rory. Glad to be here. So basically, let's talk about the challenges in public safety. And we're just going to go immediately into the next slide. You know, one of the challenges of public safety and emergency management communications is we have to have the ability to communicate in a variety of different types of deployments. So what we always talk about when we're visiting with our public safety and emergency management professionals is what their deployments or what their mission looks like. And oftentimes we'll ask the question, you know, have you been in a situation where you haven't had good LTE communications? Have you been in a situation where you haven't had satellite communications? Have you been in a situation where you haven't had either? Or have you been on a deployment or a mission where everything's gone wrong? And that's what we're here to address, to give you as many options to communicate in the field as you can. So one of the things we always talk about is you have to have multiple paths to communicate in the field. And that's what we're mainly going to be driving home today, is multiple LTE connections, a multiple satellite connection to be resilient, to be secure, and to be easy to manage. So we're going to talk about the overview of what we did in Colorado. And this was a fun 800-mile stretch that we did. It was, we covered a lot of ground. And basically, we went through a large variety of diverse topography. Colorado, like many states, have challenges. Texas, California. We were pleased to be in Colorado and to run through some really tough country. And I'm going to be excited when we present Dean to drill down on some more detail on what we ran into on this road pass. So that is where we went. So let's talk about it a little bit more, and we're going to talk about the disparate paths and the challenges a bit more on a deep dive. So this is the equipment that we brought with us. So on your left-hand side there, you're going to see a Kymeta flat panel satellite antenna, which supports LEO, low Earth orbit satellite. In the middle, we took the Dejero gateway that blended smart blended 3 cellular connections along with satellite. And then very importantly is HIFA mesh, which extends to the edge. And that means that when you're getting into a tree canopy or a challenge in the topography, that you can get back to that base of operations with mesh technology and really extend to the edge. So that's just a really rough overview of the equipment that we brought with us. And we're going to talk about a little bit of what the old model looked like. So the old model is disparity, right? You're used to being in a situation where you may be dealing with a single LTE provider. You may or may not have satellite, and you're dealing with individual IP addresses and managing 4 different disparate networks. You're dealing with 4 different providers when it comes to supporting your deployment. When you say you don't have internet or no connectivity, who do you call out of those 4 providers to figure out what's going wrong? Your mission in your deployment is providing life-saving and public safety services. It's not being an IT expert trying to figure out what's going wrong in that infrastructure you have in the rig. So let's talk about what it looks like today. This is what it looks like. On your left-hand side are all of the applications that you guys are supporting in the field, right? It could be situational awareness. It could be a pan tilt zoom camera on the top of a command vehicle. It might be drone footage, access to Esri, WebEOC, CAD, any kind of communications that you're talking about, trying to accomplish in the field, that's on the left-hand side. In the middle is what we're talking about, and that is smart blending the technology with a single IP address and smart blending all of these carriers, all of these 4 WAN carriers that include space-based LEO technologies and LTE into a single IP and a single gateway service. And that extends to either your private cloud, your private network, or your public internet. So the next slide is one of my favorites, and I'm going to credit Dean for this one. I've been on the road a lot with Dean, and he's a very visual person, and he has this basically this straw thing that he brings out, and it's a great visual representation. This is a slide version of it, and basically it represents on the left-hand side what we're doing. This is different, and Dean's going to drill into the difference between a failover failback solution, a bonded solution, and what we're calling a smart blending solution, all within a product and a network service that IP Access refers to as SuperGig. So that's a great visual representation of what we're going to be talking about when we do the deep dive. We're going to go into LEO briefly. There's been a lot of changes in satellite technology, right? We're used to the pop and point or the park and point antennas, right? There are a lot of manufacturers out there that do it. And GEO is going to be around for a while, but LEO is a big deal. And now we're, instead of an antenna that you're looking at parking and pointing, you've got an antenna controller that's sitting in your rack. You've got a modem that's sitting in your rack. You have to have an operator point it. Those are typically pointing at geosynchronous satellites that are 22,000 miles up. On that bottom side, on the far right-hand side, you're going to see LEO, 750 miles up. Why is this a big deal? You've got a lot more capacity and speed on LEO today, and also a lot less latency. Okay, so you're getting near terrestrial style latency as opposed to that 560 millisecond round trip into space and back. So I want to cover LEO is a big part of this. This is changing rapidly. It's happened in the last couple years, and it's been a dramatic change in the industry, and we're going to be talking about that as part of this solution today. So what does this antenna look like that supports LEO? And then we're going to lead into Dean. So this supports comms on the move and comms on the pause, right? You're used to the pop and point or parking antenna. That's what we refer to as comms on the pause. COTM is comms on the move. So this communicates in motion. It does access a LEO constellation. So instead of looking at a single satellite in GEO, you're basically accessing a constellation of LEOs, and that handoff occurs in the constellation rather than a single satellite. Again, we talked about 750 miles up, about 60 milliseconds of latency roughly. That modem is embedded in the pedestal of the antenna, and there is no external controller. So that is less space in your rack, and that technology is all packed into that electronically steered antenna. A big benefit also is no moving parts, right? You're not dealing with an azimuth motor or an elevation motor, a feed horn, motor, or multiple points of failure is what we're really talking about here. So when you don't, less moving parts, less cables, the less that you can have go wrong with these types of antennas. There is no operator pointing, so you're not going to have to train somebody to be an IT expert, to go to the antenna controller, to find the satellite, to switch satellites if you have a line of sight obstruction. This is no operator pointing. It is also low profile, so you can put this on a variety of different vehicles in the field, whether it be a large command style vehicle, an SUV, an ambulance, fire apparatus, etc. And this is probably going to be on a separate discussion, but it does have enhanced security options or private links. If you are using Azure, AWS, Google Cloud, you will be happy to know that we are on net with those providers today. So that makes your IT experts very, very happy. All right, so we're going to go into the deeper dive on the testing. So I'm going to hand this off to Dean, and he's going to kind of cover the ground on the route that we took. Dean, take it away.
Hey, Michael, thanks. I'm glad you enjoyed the straws. They did double as an emergency supply for our drinks on the road, right? So that worked out pretty good for us. I want to just, before we get started, I want to talk a little bit about some of the experiences that we had on the road. So one of the things that I want to share with you is this particular publicly available website. It's called cellmapper.net. And one of the things that we noticed is that we were seeing a change in the location of the quality of the signal all along our route. For instance, on these particular two slides that you're seeing here, the green, the very bright green, indicates a best case scenario. Those are really high quality calls, and we're able to connect easily along those. This particular route is a section of our route that was on day 3. It was Boulder, Colorado, on our way up to Fort Collins through via Gun Barrel, right? So when you look at this other colors, I want you to notice something in the middle, that you're going to see lots of dark greens and lots of reds. And what reds are is indicating drop calls. So for this location, even though we had two good providers, you can still see that there's sort of a dead zone right in the middle of this drive. And this is on a very common road in Colorado. It's a highway, and you can see that, you know, because of the population, there are areas that are going to be dead. And why that plays into our discussion is, you know, again, if you're relying on that single carrier, you know, where are the challenges going to be? So just wanted to share that with you first and foremost. So then when we move to the next slide, what we're looking at is some definitions that we will utilize when we look at our next series of slides. And the next series of slides are going to show locations on our route and how long we were doing the testing. So again, I love this straw idea, so I'm going to keep with it. We've graduated to a pipe here, but some of the definitions that I want to just point out that you're going to see on our graphs are throughput, bandwidth, and latency. So throughput is going to be basically measuring the data that's transmitted and received, right? So during a specific time period. So think about that like water that's running through the pipe. Your bandwidth is equivalent to the capacity, right? So in this case, if we're using pipes as a demo, think about a larger pipe for greater bandwidth, right? So that's what one of the challenges in public safety is that pipe needs to keep getting bigger right now, especially for the applications that we're starting to see being utilized in the field, you know, in your mobile office. And then lastly, the last definition is latency. And latency, very simply put, you know, is the speed, how quickly your stuff gets there, right? And so think about it like how fast the water is traveling through the pipe. So we'll take a look at our first location. This location was actually on day 3. And I'm just going to paint the picture of what you see on this image. This set of graphs will be consistent through the next series of slides. So in the upper left section of the slide, you're going to see representative pictures of what we were seeing on the road, right? I couldn't put too many on there, but I tried to mix it to show you sort of the conditions that we were experiencing on the road. On the right side of the top image, you can see about how long this section of the testing was being done. And then it'll indicate roughly what day it was on our trip and sort of the sections that we were traveling through. This first slide is on day 3, and it's between Boulder and Fort Collins. So this kind of dovetails back to those two slides that I was showing you earlier that talk about there was a dead section. That's down there in the bottom left of my map, where you can see that Gun Barrel is on the road, right? So even on the most traveled roads, there are still going to be areas that potentially have challenges. Then as we work our way down, we have the map, which is GPS positioned, reporting every few seconds on our route. The arrow is a direction of travel. And then below that, you have our ping test. We're using a Raspberry Pi in this travel. And what we did is we had several programs running on the Pi. One of them was a ping test where we're doing 1 second pings, right? So every second we're pinging out to 8.8.8.8. And you can see that on the graph, you can see that the measurement is showing the timeline. The timeline will be consistent throughout all our graphs. And you can see in this case that, you know, have about a second on the top of the graph, right? So you can see some points where there is some latency popping in, but for quite a bit of the time, you can see a very consistent low latency application. And I'll explain to you why you see those very even points. It'll make sense a little bit later when we see the other sections of the graphs. So as we move our way to the right section of the graphing, we have our availability. So this is a 1 minute average. And you can notice that that scale is set to 100 and only goes down to 95%. So we set ourselves a pretty high benchmark for our availability on the ping. You can see the percentage is pretty consistent on this particular trip. Below that, we're using an iPerf test where we're actually bursting 50 megabits of data as a throughput test. This is done every 15 minutes. And this is done while we're making phone calls through Wi-Fi or utilizing the bandwidth to do other things like meetings. Typically, there were about 2 of us in the vehicles. So we definitely have periods of times where you know, there's activity on the device and it's not just being tested. Below that, let me just jump in here on this part. You can see that if you'll notice those every 15 minutes of this throughput test on the iPerf, you can see that that lines up pretty well to the ping and where the latency increases. So we're doing a rapid dump of 50 megabits of data onto the line. So you can see clearly how those are lining up with the load on the ping test. And then lastly, we use a download throughput success test. Typically on these, they're going to line up with the, you know, the burst. And you can see that, you know, yellow means caution, and you'll see some red as we get a little further down into the graphs. So we'll move on to the next slide, please. So I'm jumping around here just to, you know, make it interesting and to save the $1 million highway for last. This was day 1 of our testing. This is only a 2-hour block, but in this section of travel, it was very dramatic difference in the geography. In some areas, we were seeing sheer mountains and large areas of open prairie as we got to the end of our trip near Buena Vista. You can see that we had some little greater sections of latency right in the middle of our trip, and that equated to some of the areas that you see in those photographs on the right. We still had decent availability, and most of our throughput tests were exceptionally successful. We'll move on to the next slide. This will be day 3 of our testing. And this is the $1 million highway. There's some of you, I'm sorry, this is day 2 of our testing. This is the $1 million highway. It was right in the middle of the trip. And the first section, this particular section of testing is 6.5 hours. You can see some of the terrain that we were going through. Lots of hairpin turns, mountains on each side of us. And one of the things that will be obvious right away is you do see a section of breakage in the measurement. And you also see a section where the performance is a little lower. And Scott, if you can advance the slide, I want to circle those 2 items because that'll also change the photographs. And it'll show you a little closer to where we were on the route. In this section of the route, you know, I think I've heard Rory talk about it. I know I've heard Weaver talk about it. There were sections where the rocks were coming over the top of the road. We clearly had no LTE or cellular coverage in this area, and we were relying 100% on our the Kymeta antenna. And we did stop for some photos. There was a 10-minute break in the connectivity where what we believe is that we were parked blocking the antenna. We weren't always paying attention to this chart, but you can see clearly that it's not always infallible. and there are areas where you have to think about what's above you. Obviously, in this particular slide, you can see that we did have some breaks in coverage, but overall, very good performance. And this again is a 6.5 hour block of testing. Next slide, please, Scott. And you can go to the next slide. So you've seen a little bit about our testing, and now we're going to kind of do a deeper dive into the technology, which was our solution for this trip. Before I show you the difference between a bonded solution and our smart blending technology, I wanted to bring up this graph and talk about what I see in my job when I was in public safety and what I'm hearing from the professionals in the field when I speak to them. And I kind of affectionately refer to this slide as the public safety quality of service ladder, right? It's a ladder that you climb. And at the bottom of the ladder are the most critical elements. And then as you think about what you want to do today, tomorrow, or in the future, these are bandwidth requirements that are clearly documented as we talk to people utilizing different technology, whether it be streaming, whether it be operating UAS, body-worn cameras. So at the bottom, you see voice, and that's life safety. You can't do this job without having some kind of voice comms. So we define that as truly critical. And as you move up the ladder, you can see that the coloring changes from critical to maybe mission critical in yellow. Things you want to do for other people who show up, for instance, if you have other mutual aid situations where you have other agencies coming into the location, you might want to provide Wi-Fi. You might all want to be sharing a common operating picture by utilizing TAC. Maybe you train with TAC. Maybe your other agencies train with TAC. And then you also want to provide some mutual aid comms. And then lastly, the heavier lift there is that future proofing, right? What do you want to do in the future? Many agencies like Los Angeles Police Department are already utilizing streaming out of their vehicles because they've determined that that is a liability reducer. If they can get that information back to their command center or to provide situational awareness to people who are providing resources, that can cut down the response time and it can decrease liability. Also at the top there, we have agencies that are future-proofing by utilizing their connectivity to upload their body-worn camera video to a central repository. Can cut down on costs by having other individuals be able to look at the video before the deputy or officer is off duty. Your supervisor can look at it if there's any potential concern. If there's a use of force and somebody needs to write supplemental reports, all that can be done before that officer or deputy gets out of the field. So again, the quality of service ladder plays into this discussion because you're at a certain point on this ladder. Where do you want to be tomorrow? Next slide, please, Scott. We're going to look at a couple of current solutions. The first solution, which is out there and is being utilized right now, is a failover solution. The challenge, and again, this is where I love my straws, the challenge is typically what happens in this solution is that you're utilizing a single provider. And if that provider, because you're mobile, or if that provider, because you're in a fringe area, is not the strongest, all of those devices or applications that you're trying to utilize need to either disconnect and reconnect, which we call, a redial, or they're not operating in a proper fashion. So in a failover circumstance, even though you may have two SIMs, your pipe is still small. Remember, we went back, go back to some of our definitions, right? And basically that's your connectivity, how much you can serve across that pipe. Next, thank you, Scott. So another popular way to do this is cellular bonding. Typically, you might find that in like a PEP link. And what is done in this case is that the traffic is assigned to different SIMs. The failover is a little shorter in these cases, but again, there's still a challenge. You're typically dividing traffic and you're moving it to certain SIMs. So if you need a large amount of traffic and you're spreading that over certain providers, if you're mobile, you may have the same challenge. You lose connectivity. So then what our 211 did in this scheme that we were on, our travel, right, is we blended all of the providers we had, and we blended the Kymeta antenna into one continuous large pipe. Here at Dejero, we call that smart blending technology, but basically the way to think about this is all of the providers that you have, FirstNet, Verizon, T-Mobile. In some cases, if you're a utility provider, maybe it's AT&T instead of FirstNet, and that satellite are all seamlessly blended across one connection. So your equipment, the equipment that you have attached to this, looks at this single connection and it interprets it as one single connection. The advantage to that, again, is that you don't have a dial over situation. You don't have a failover. So, you know, in summary, the way that we seamlessly smart blend and add all of these to one pipe means that you can quickly add available sources. Who knows, maybe you pull up into a command area and there's an Ethernet connection available. You can add that to the blend. All of your equipment will work seamlessly. In the case of our trip, again, we had three. We had a FirstNet, we had a Verizon, and we had a T-Mobile, and then we had our Kymeta antenna. So you've seen how our connections work, and now you've arrived at the scene with all this big pipe, large amount of connectivity, which is great. And so now the next question you might have is, how do you take that and push it out amongst a larger operating area? Let's say you have a search, something of that nature. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce our partner, Drew from Haifa, who's going to walk you through some of their solutions to that question. Now that you've arrived and you have that great connectivity, how do you get it out to the rest of the team? Drew, take it away.
Thanks, Dean. That was a perfect intro for Haifa Mesh and our solutions that allow first responders to take your network where you need it. And we do this by extending existing communications capabilities. So everything you just heard about of establishing that satellite connection with a Kymeta, blending the networks together with Dejero, you can now take that and connect your frontline responders miles away from that core IP connection with Haifa Mesh devices and the network that it creates. Basically, what we've done is we've taken military-grade mesh technology and made it purpose-built for emergency response. A lot of those technologies are heavy in antenna configuration, a lot of wires, a lot of back-end IP configuration. What we did was take all of that and put it in a form factor, a frequency, and a price point that is applicable to public safety. So first on form factor, what you can see there is our range extension kit. It comes in a flyaway Pelican case. It comes with 4 mesh radios, 3 of our portable radios, which have 12-hour battery life. They're meant to go with the first responder. There's a belt clip to put it on the hip, a carabiner to carry it on a backpack. You can leave it behind with the carabiner to allow for further extension. There's LED lights on the devices that indicate your connectivity level. So when you are further away from a device, perhaps beyond line of sight, you have that awareness of your level of connectivity to the network. And we have fixed devices that can sit in a Pelican case or a vehicle and allow you to connect to a device like a Dejero to get out to the internet, so that your mesh devices in the field that are allowing for that Wi-Fi access can get you out via our mesh network and that robust connectivity from the Dejero. These devices operate on public safety zone 4.9 frequency. So you actually own the spectrum, you actually own the equipment, so it truly is your network. And from a price point, we've cut those high-end military-grade mesh devices, we cut that price point in half. So we're really looking at this to be a applicable solution in that response scenario where you can quickly and easily grab these devices and go and be connected to Wi-Fi. It's a simple SSID and password, connect your smartphone, your tablet, your sensors, your cameras, and you can access that software and application ecosystem when coverage doesn't exist, when towers are down. As you can see, the various use cases at the bottom, everything from a wildland firefighting scenario, which we'll go into in a second, all the way through to your in-building scenarios, deep into large buildings, deep underground, allows you to take that IP connection and really extend your Wi-Fi access in the field. So moving on to the next slide, this would be a scenario, if you recall back to Dean's slide, where there was a gap in connection, right? There was a gap in LTE connection, which you could clearly see. Here is, we're in a mountainside with dense 100-foot tree canopy. We've deployed, well, you can see here, 10 devices across a mesh network. You can see in the satellite imagery, the GPS location of devices. This is actually our software platform that runs on a Windows tablet. So in this scenario, we had a vehicle that included a Kymeta antenna and a Dejero parked up in that upper right corner of the map. This was the intersection of a dirt road where we were able to get satellite connectivity and provide that IP backhaul. Now, if you have a field out in the team there, the only way for them to access the internet currently would be they'd have to be close to the vehicle to get that Wi-Fi access around that vehicle. What we've enabled in this scenario is well over half a kilometer extension of that Wi-Fi access as we're building out our mesh network in a natural search and rescue wildland firefighting type of scenario. So we have a vehicle in that top right location. We have another vehicle down at node 13, if you can see, further down the dirt path there. And then from there, we have individual responders and teams of responders out further up on the ridge in the tree canopy, down further on two directions on those dirt roads. And what we're able to accomplish was each team member was running a video and voice conference call over Microsoft Teams, as well as Esri, Survey 123, and Quick Capture. So typical public safety applications in the field utilizing smartphones in a completely LTE, LMR denied environment. And the entire team was connected and communicating with each other and accessing the applications that they typically would. This specific agency is currently deployed with 7 REX kits, positioning those REX kits with SUVs that have satellite connectivity, and the individual portable devices are handed out to the frontline responders as they're working the fire line. So that you can see in this picture, this is the exact replica of what you'd see on a fire line as you're trying to contain that fire with a HIFA mesh network in place. So with that, I will hand it back over to Scott for a Q&A session. Thanks.
Thanks, Drew. So as I mentioned earlier, the Q&A chat in Zoom, that function is open. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to add them. So I'll just kind of read a couple of questions that we've received here, and then turn to the appropriate experts to answer it. So first off, in regards to the solution that we showed here, is it specific to vehicles like mobile command? And I think a follow-up to that is, what vehicle would the Kymeta antenna fit on? So I don't know if maybe that's something, Michael, you'd be best suited to answer.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So, form factor is a big deal. All deployments are different. Sometimes you can't get a heavy asset in. So, you need maybe it's an SUV, maybe you need a portable drop kit. So, these form factors come in a variety of flavors. So, one of them for mobile command typically involves a permanently mounted Chimeta antenna in the roof, and that Ethernet connection is plugging into the back of a Dejero gateway that sits inside the rack of a command. If you're dealing with an SUV, you may be running DC power. Same thing, it would go on the roof, run to the battery, or plug into an inverter. And the same situation, plugging into the back of either a gateway or maybe it's the 211, a smaller form factor in an SUV. Now, in the case of Colorado, we actually had a portable version of Chimeta, and we also have a portable version of Dejero that we just simply call a drop kit. So this is, instead of being permanently mounted and fixed to an asset, this comes in a case. You pop the lid off, plug it in with a simple AC power cord, minimal cabling, and you tail that into a Dejero gateway or a 211 that allows you to get that smart blending to occur as well. So what we like to do as we're talking to agencies is, again, we always ask the question, tell me what your deployment looks like. Tell me what your mission is. And then we can help you kind of ascertain, what is the best fit or best practices for getting what you need in the field.
Thanks, Mike. It's just another question here. It's maybe more for Dean. What's the difference between smart blending with Dejero and other LTE radio gateways?
So I think that, if I went back to the straws, the difference that our technology is doing is it's combining all of the sources. So for instance, in our case, it was FirstNet, Verizon, and T-Mobile. And we use a proprietary, basically a point-to-point UDP tunnel on each end to constantly monitor those different sources and make decisions per packet on where the best route for the traffic is, especially when you're moving in a mobile environment. So in most cases, like I would say that in the competitors that I see, there's a failover, which means that all the traffic is going to one. And then if that's not working, it goes to the next one. I would say that the closest solution to ours is going to be a PEP link. But, again, knowing that those are doing it slightly different than ours, they're using different algorithms. It's a little more challenging to blend plug-in items quickly and blend them into the single blend. As part of that too, we do have federal clients. So we're beginning actually the FedRAMP certification process that includes FIPS 140 and NIST 800, which is a very complex certification process, and it leans more towards the security concerns. So the major difference is we're really pursuing all the certifications allowed especially for sensitive needs in public safety here in the United States. And then our technology is using a blending algorithm, proprietary, that is constantly looking at every one of those packets and choosing the best route. The closest one to that, again, would be a PEP link.
Thanks, Dean. I think this one's more for Drew. What's the range of the radios in the HIFA kit?
Sure. The range of the standard power, so the 0.5 watt devices, controlled testing, we've seen 2 to 3 miles. Line of sight, direct line of sight. What I've seen out in the field with customers is I've gotten over 1 mile between devices. I think what the question asked with the tree canopy, what's the distance? It's a great question and one tough to answer, but I'd say in that specific scenario, we were about 250 to 300 yards when we were directly under the tree canopy between two devices. But obviously, there's a lot of factors you have to consider in that. Was there any land interference as well? Because that can kill a connection. Did it rain the night before? Were the leaves wet? That can have significant RF penetration impact. So there's a lot of other factors, which really speaks to the benefit of a mesh network with multiple devices. Because you add that resiliency into the network, you add the ability to connect off multiple devices, and have that robust, failover of network paths within the mesh network.
Thanks, Drew. And I think this one's probably more for Dean. How do you get around the security of a session coming from multiple carriers, causing the session to time out in the case of SSL or IPsec connectivity?
Good question. We support IPsec and other tunnel technologies. We're using proprietary point-to-point UDP tunnels on each side. And the way we get around I think your question is, how do we get around it, the assembly in there? And what we do is we assign a static IP. So the devices recognize that as a single location.
Thanks, Dean. And then one, I think for Michael, Starlink has a much smaller form factor and would be easier to carry through heavy underbrush, as well as potentially raise/mount to a higher pole to bypass blockage by brush or trees. Why is the Kymeta a better solution than Starlink for the use case of wildland firefighters that you spoke to? This might be Michael and Drew.
Yeah, I'd be happy to address that one. So Starlink certainly has its place in the space. It's got some great portability. One of the aspects that our public safety and emergency management customers demand is, number one, security is a big thing. So right now, today, Starlink is what we would like to term as, for lack of a better phrase, dirty internet. So for those that are concerned about security, we are encrypting from the gateway, right, which you're blending into. So take your OneWeb, Kymeta, that's the network we're using to supply that satellite service. So it's Kymeta over the OneWeb network, going back to the Dejero gateway with a single IP address, blending all the LTE connections and the Kymeta OneWeb solution, right? And that is the secure connection back. If you're talking about Starlink on an island, it certainly has its place. Public safety, however, I mean, I have a Starlink. In fact, I'm going to be using it. I'm going to be on some paid time off, and I'm packing a Starlink with me. Is it great out at where my family's farm is, out in eastern Montana? Fantastic. But a lot of the public safety folks have a high tolerance or an intolerance for opening tickets online and responsiveness. So it's really an individual choice. It has to do with the bandwidth, the throughput, the portability, the support, and the ticketing. So there is a broader picture here than viewing Kymeta as on an island versus Starlink as a service. What we're talking about today is a product called SuperGig, which is smart blending all of those solutions together. If somebody had a Starlink terminal and wanted to add that to the blend, go for it. Plug it in the back of the 211 or in the back of the Dejero gateway, and you would be blending a Starlink connection to it as well. So again, we have no distaste or anything like that regarding Starlink. It's a affordable technology and it has its place. But we are about the OneWeb Kymeta terminal when it comes to public safety.
Thanks, Michael. Next question. How is IP addressing handled? Is it NAT transversal? What about IP version 4 versus version 6? I'm not sure who wants to take that one.
Yeah, I mean,
that sounds Deanish.
Yeah. I was reading Jeff's question. That's a great question, Jeff. And I'm gonna some of the nitty gritty that you're asking for, I don't have the perfect answer for you. So I'm going to ask one of my experts I'm going to phone a friend and get that information for you. If I don't get it by the end of this call, I will post it on the information that we're going to have as a follow up here. So I can tell you that we're currently IPv4 rated, and we're working on the technologies for the future.
Thanks, Dean. I did forget to mention everybody on the call gets a phone a friend if you need it, so that's fair. Next question, is the Cradlepoint modem in a Rex kit redundant? When will other cellular stack components in the Dejero setup be connected to the Rex kit? It might be a group question.
So yeah, I can take that one. So the Cradlepoint modem is included in the Rex kit really for 3 reasons, and the overarching reason is for ease of use. Firstly, the Cradlepoint allows the end user to just plug in any external Ethernet cord into our mesh system and have everything just operate. So in this instance, we were able to take an Ethernet cord from the Dejero and plug it into the WAN port of the Cradlepoint and have the entire mesh network continue to operate as it should. Now, in the back end, there's a lot of IP configuration, DHCP addressing on the mesh side that we want to simplify, and we have simplified for the public safety end customer. So from the Rex kit standpoint, that is the #1 reason for including the Cradlepoint, that ease of use, and to avoid the end user having to go in and do IP schemes every time they deploy a Rex kit and want to plug in some sort of external IP source. Now, take that a step further and look at the new Ford Bronco that was just announced. That had all 3 of our technologies incorporated in the vehicle itself. And in that scenario, we had a Dejero with Ethernet plugged directly into our fixed mobile access point or MAP device. So you can see in pictures online of that's just the Dejero unit and a MAP fixed in the back of a vehicle. And that's a pre-configured deployment where then you bring our portable devices to that scenario and everything just works under that IP scheme and that DHCP configuration. So long story short, it's an ease of use for the end user that we include the Cradlepoint router in the Rex kit.
Thanks, Drew. Actually, another question for you while you're on a roll here. Can the Hyphen network be expanded into a geographic area, possibly through drone attachment, so that a lost hiker could establish phone signal on a non-public safety network to call out and help first responders locate them? So
the answer to that, is it doable? Yes. Can we do it right now? No. Can we do it in the future? Possibly. So from a technology standpoint, that's absolutely doable today. We put our devices on drones, either both in a crewed way and in an integrated way, where it's either we extend the mesh connection and we actually get better range with that. And then you can either have a Wi-Fi bubble from the drone itself or leverage that to then have a mesh connection on the ground in that area where you want to have Wi-Fi access. Now, with our mesh going over 4.9, it's limited to public safety use cases today. However, the FCC is looking at non-public safety usage of the 4.9 band, which it'll take years to get there. But that scenario that you described is possible in the future with the technology as it exists today.
Thanks, Drew. And a question for Mike: can your legacy VSAT products be integrated into this new gateway option?
Absolutely. So Geo is not going anywhere. So now if somebody today is buying or building a brand new command vehicle, or they're looking at retrofitting a vehicle that has a legacy antenna on it, LEO is probably your path to go. There's more throughput available on the LEOs. All the benefits that I talked about previously. But if you're taking, we have customers that are running side by side GEO and LEO and 3 LTE carriers. So the long answer is yes. customers today can plug in. We just treat anything coming to the back of that WAN port is just treated as an additional connection. So it is not exclusive to any type of particular satellite technology, GEO or LEO. Great question.
Thanks, Mike. So I don't see any other questions at the moment, but feel free to keep asking if you do have any, and we can circle back. I'll be sure to watch the panel here. But in the interest of time, I did just want to move on to the next section about how we can help. So Mike, I'm going to let you take it away to kind of summarize the conversation here so far.
Okay, great. We're on the home stretch here, guys, near the end of the top of the hour here. So wanted to bring it all together. Everyone on this call is deeply passionate about public safety. I've spent a lot of time on the road with these guys, not just in Colorado, at various events, exercises, and I've been proud to be with them side by side. We are here to help you. We are a resource for you. So one of the things in traveling around the country and talking to different agencies is just putting a real basic thought process together, and that's to identify the weak links on your deployments. If you're doing an exercise and you have a hot wash and you're looking and examining what went right and what went wrong, identify those weak links, and then put your plan together to improve. We realize that budget cycles are what they are in public safety. So if we know that this year is passing and you're already looking into 2024, the time to start is now, right? Because otherwise it's kicking the can down the road, and then by the time you put a plan together, we're just skipping again into another perpetual funding cycle. So you got to be persistent in pursuing the plan. So funding is a big part of it. You may be putting proposals together. You may be seeking a grant funding process. So by putting this on your roadmap, putting that plan together and pursuing it is going to help you formulate. And again, we're a resource for you if you're talking about budgetary pricing and form factors and photos, so you can help author or script the language you need for procurement. And I just want to punctuate this by saying, folks in public safety and emergency management, really, you guys deserve the right tools to be effective. Having been in a very tough car accident with my family, I can tell you I've traveled around the country and I've spoke at some TED-style talks about my personal experience on being on the other side of this. And had it not been for the response that I got from various agencies, myself and my family would not be here today. So when I say that we are 100% behind and passionate about what we want to accomplish for you, we mean it. So, and we'll just go to the last slide, which is really the link. So as a follow-up action item, if you have any questions that we haven't covered today, please click or copy down this link. And it's just a follow-up questionnaire or some items that caught your interest. And if you want to set up a one-on-one call, or you want a couple of us to be on the call to discuss this in more of a deep dive or more detail, this is where it starts. So we do invite you to engage us. It's what we're here for, and we are here to help. And with that, I'll turn it back to Scott.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, so I didn't see any other questions, but if anyone that's on here has any, feel free to follow up with us. As I mentioned earlier on during the housekeeping part, we'll be sure to send out details when we have the recorded version available and the slides. So if you didn't get a chance to capture that link, we'll make sure to get it out to you. But overall, I hope everyone found this informative. And thank you again for your time, and have a great day. Thanks, everyone.